So the BPT of 5%, do you think that can already be brought back to
I have made my
4%?
position about that, and I have said that I don't want it rolled back. I'd like to see what fiscal year 2020 and fiscal year 2021 gives, because as a result of what has happened, we were able to actually also close the gap as a result of President Trump's Jobs Act legislation that took away about 68 million from our general fund. So those are the kinds of things that I am really looking at, Heidi, before, and like I have said, I have spoken to many business leaders also, and they are okay with the 5%.
Will that stay at least until fiscal year 2021? So 2022, there might be a
I would like
consideration.
for it to stay, and I'd like for it to stay forever.
Might be a
I would like
consideration.
for it to stay, and I'd like for it to stay forever.
Might be a
I would like
consideration.
for it to stay, and I'd like for it to stay forever. If we start collecting more, and if we have other new sources of revenue to make up for that, then yeah, that's something that we can look at.
Forever. 5%.
That's what I would like, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm learning how to use this software package. So let me recap. Today, we're here at Adelut. Today, we are starting a people's revolution in an effort to make the government more responsible and more responsive to the people of Guam than it currently is right now, because it makes serving politically well-connected insiders and other politicians more important than serving the people who elected them. And that is a situation that cannot stand. And the way we do it is we follow the example of our forefathers, who in 1776 threw a little tea party in Boston Harbor because they were very upset over the fact that the politicians far away from them were ignoring them and taxing the crap out of them. And as a result, we started a people power movement that turned into the American Revolution, that was the founding step in the creation of the United States. Here on Guam, we are doing a similar thing. Even though we have representation in the legislature, our politicians aren't listening to us, and they're taxing the crap out of a population that can ill afford it. And since the politicians won't listen to us and won't do anything to create a government of people, by people, for people, instead of the current one we have, which is up by politicians and politically well-connected insiders, for politicians and politically well-connected insiders. And as we saw in the news yesterday, where the head of the contractor license board, Buddy Orsini, was resigned after he got caught working behind the scenes, using the influence and power of his office to stack the deck for a politically well-connected insider to get a bid through the Office of Public Accountability. That's the kind of thing that's routine here in government in Guam, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. What we're here to talk today about is the state of our island. And the state of our island is not good. We're now 24 months into a public health emergency pandemic, and the actions of this administration have basically strangled the lifeblood out of our economy, while at the same time promoting the financial security and safety of politically well-connected companies, as we saw with the Pacific Star Hotel and other organizations that are getting millions of dollars of non-bid contracts as a result of the emergency procurement process. We're talking about money that would have been better spent serving the people. And I'll just give you an example. While many of the rooms that were paid for on an unsigned, no contract basis with Pacific Star, it was millions of dollars. And yet this same administration refuses to do things like overhaul the labor and delivery room at Guam Memorial Hospital, but we'll get into that in a few minutes. But the reason we as people need to be concerned is because the governor has just posted a $1 billion budget that has no basis in reality. And when I say no basis in reality, I'm saying that, okay, technical issue, there we go. No basis in reality, because here we have a population of 40,000 households. The majority of those households, nearly 75–80% of them, before the pandemic, were trapped in low-wage service sector jobs that required 2 or 3 income streams just to cover the basic cost of living: food, shelter, clothing, transportation. And I say that because we know that in the special economic session in November 2019, almost every single special fund of government of Guam was in arrears or not meeting projections of the previous CALVO budget. And as a result of that failure to meet those budgets, government of Guam in 2019 was heading into arrears, another red year. They were going over the financial cliff, close behind the example of Puerto Rico, which in 2016 declared bankruptcy because their politicians and political leaders failed to properly manage the people's funds. And that's what we see happening in 2019. And it's unfortunate that in 2020, it was only the arrival of the COVID virus that saved this administration. Because while going into 2020, the administration was heading for a very, very bad year, and it would have ended maybe $50 to $80 million in the red based on their spending rate. The arrival of $1 billion of federal funds through the CARES Act saved this administration. And you think they would have been grateful and honored the premise of the funding and used the money to take care of the people, but that is not what happened. The governor used the money to take care of herself and politically well-connected insiders, as we saw in example after example, where the CARES Act funds were diverted, providing luxury suites for department heads that were getting double pay and triple pay, spending their time at the Pacific Star while the people of Guam were spending hours in lines at food distribution centers. That is not how those funds were meant to be spent. And now, in the meantime, the governor is still sitting on top of millions of dollars of funds, and all the politicians coming into 2020 promised to roll back the 5% business privilege tax to 4%, but they didn't do it. Instead, what they did, they towed the party line and continued to put politically well-connected insiders' financial security and safety ahead of those of the people. And right now, the taxpayers of Guam are expected to bear the burden of another billion-dollar budget. That doesn't say good things about this administration. It doesn't say good things about the future of the people of Guam here. So let's get back to the basics. Oops. What we are looking at here is a government that continues to deteriorate when it comes to protecting the people of Guam. And in addition to the Charles Orsini debacle over Chamorro Land Trust, we have an example of the Guam Medical Board refusing to listen to people who have filed complaints with the medical board. Further, hold on one second. Yeah, there we are. Further separating the people of Guam from the politicians that we hired and through the politicians appointed to take care of the people. But the last thing we see is politicians showing any care whatsoever in protecting the people. I mean, if they did, meth wouldn't be one of the cheapest, as cheap as it is right now. I mean, even the Drug Enforcement Agency recognizes that the flow of drugs on this island is so easy that meth prices have plummeted. And yet we don't see any politicians stepping up to the plate doing anything to slow down the flow of meth on this island. And we always talk, the politicians always talk about the fact that the children are our greatest asset. And yet right now they're in the process of gutting the budget of the Department of Education while giving pay raises to police who deserve it, and talking about giving pay raises to teachers who do deserve it, but at the same time they're gutting Department of Education with the funds they need to prepare our children to compete in an international economy. The other issue I have is that the politicians have long ignored public health. And the reason why we are seeing the numbers of people dying in our hospital as a result of this COVID situation is more about the poor state of our public health than it is about COVID, because 90% of the people who have passed away had comorbidities or were older. And public health has done nothing to improve that situation. So it comes back to the fact that not only is this government not taking care of the people, but this government is not standing up to its commitments they made on the campaign trail. Not me, they were the ones that made the commitment on the campaign trail that they were going to be the most transparent administration in the history of Guam, and we don't see that. Okay. I really appreciate your patience with me on this one. Like I said, this is a new thing for me, and here we go. Oops, no, there we go. Live TV, live broadcasting at its finest. On with the story. All through this pandemic, we have seen nothing but abuse by this administration. And one of the largest abuses has been taking large amounts of that federal money and setting it aside for non-critical things. I mean, when I looked at some of the expenditures that this administration was spending for on this money here, I was blown away. I mean, when we first got this money, our economy was shut down. We had 40,000 people out of a job. What did politicians do? Out of that 118,000 that they spent out of the first round, they did things like buy 60-inch color TVs for conference rooms, buy designer laptop bags, custom wireless mouse, and one of my favorites is they gave $38,000 to Guam Water Authority for public service announcements announcing that Guam Water Authority exists, as if the people of Guam didn't know Guam Water Authority exists. Now, Senator Sabina Perez claims that she is going to drill down and get to the bottom of these sole source contracts, but it's not enough to have a senator drill down on these contracts. The important thing would have been to have the Attorney General drill down on these contracts, but so far he is totally absent from the arena when it comes to investigating white-collar crime, government fraud and abuse of federal funds. So what we're looking at here is what politicians have been doing since this pandemic hit. I mean, with our economy shut down and people out of work and spending hours in lines to get food at food distribution centers, you would think the senators would be burning the candle at both ends, working night and day to improve the quality of life of the people who were trapped inside. And you would be wrong. So while we were hunkered down in our homes and wondering where we were going to get food and how we were going to protect ourselves, one of the top priorities of the legislature has been to rename the southern villages. And on top of that, they wanted to ban those dreaded plastic bags, which I appreciate the sentiment, I really do. But what I don't appreciate the fact is it's kind of a false feel good. Yes, we banned bags at the grocery stores, but you know what we didn't ban? All the plastic that goes in the bags, and that's the funny part, because the bags you get at the grocery stores were biodegradable. We can't use biodegradable bags anymore. Now, all the products that come in plastic bags and plastic jars and plastic containers, they're not biodegradable. So what did we really accomplish during the pandemic, other than make it difficult for people to shop? Also, our legislature was very concerned about lowering the age of sexual consent down to 12 years old. I have no idea how or why our politicians, including the Attorney General, thank God Senator Terlahi stood up against it, as did a few other senators, but we can't always rely on this body for common sense. Remember, these are the people that spent days, weeks, months, and thousands of dollars debating the dumb hiker, dumb swimmer bill during the pandemic. So when you go to the election, remember these names. These are the people that believe that we should lower the age of consent to 12 years old. But they're not done yet. When I say they're not done yet, Sabina Perez isn't happy taking away your plastic shopping bag. Now she's coming after paper bags as well. God forbid that we have anything left to carry groceries out of stores. I mean, in the future, we're basically going to have to buy our own shopping carts at the rate she's going, because now we don't have plastic bags, the biodegradable plastic bags. How long before she comes after the trash bags? I mean, we can't use biodegradable plastic bags in the to protect the landfill, but in the meantime, we're throwing plastic bags into the landfill. That doesn't make any sense. But we're talking about the legislature. And speaking of the power of our politicians and the lack of concern they have about us. In the midst of the pandemic, while we were receiving billions of dollars in federal funding, Governor Leon-Guerrero sent Josh at great taxpayer expense, I might add, because I did a FOIA on his travel and the party that traveled with him. And by my estimate, I think we spent close to $100,000 these past couple of years sending politicians to the United Nations to beg for mercy, to be freed from the oppression of the United States, who forced our people to accept billions of dollars in CARES Act funding and American Rescue Act funding and FEMA funding to protect the people. God forbid if the governor allows this to continue. And as a matter of fact, she's in Washington right now, testifying before the U.S. Senate, requesting that the U.S. Senate free the people of Guam from the yoke of oppression we suffer under. Oh, did I mention that there are a bunch of pork barrel politicians? Oh, okay. So anyway, we have this little thing called consent to the governed. And this is in the U.S. Declaration of Independence. And it says, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent to the governed. Now, the reason I bring this up is we have an election coming up, and that's where we give our consent to who governs us. Now, I've had a couple people tell me that this video, when they saw my practice, when they said, oh, this is too long, no one's going to watch it. And that's exactly what politicians are hoping. The politicians here on Guam and the politically well-connected insiders are hoping that you do not watch this. You do not like this, and that you do not share this. And the reason is because they are hoping to pull the wool over our eyes once again. They're hoping that we are going to forget all the campaign promises they made and broke, starting with making Guam Memorial Hospital a priority. They didn't do that. They were going to make the people of Guam safer. We've now gotten to the point where people I know are buying guns. People I never thought would buy guns are buying guns. And that is something that really concerns me. Ah, I see that. We're going to have to change that. I love live podcasting. They all promised that they were going to roll. Even the roosters are upset with Adelude. And the 36th Guam legislature, as you just heard. All the politicians in the 30s, you tell them, all the politicians in the 36th Guam legislature promised three things. They promised that they were going to make the people of Guam safer. They promised they were going to make government more physically responsible. And they promised they were going to make our children our priority. But we haven't seen anything like that happen in the 36th Guam legislature so far. So here's what I'm saying. You know, instead of eliminating paper bags, why don't we do something that really could make a difference? And I'll tell you why. The other day I went for a walk in Dedido. I almost got eaten alive. So instead of banning paper bags, why don't the senators do something about the stray population here on Guam that makes it dangerous for people to walk in the villages and our children to walk to the bus stops? I know people that drive their kids just a couple of blocks to school because they don't want to take the chance that their children will be attacked by dogs. So, if we go back to 2018, when the business privilege tax was raised, it was only supposed to last for a period of 8 months. Yeah, me and it was only supposed to last for 8 months, but then a funny thing happened on the way to the starting days of the Leon-Guerrero Tenorio administration. I mean, remember, Governor Leon-Guerrero on the campaign trail campaigned often that the business privilege tax increase was not needed. And if she had been governor in 2018 instead of Eddie Calvo, shows you how old I am, instead of Eddie Calvo, that there would not have been an increase in the business privilege tax. But the extending the business privilege tax was one of the first bills passed by the 35th Guam legislature. And the governor, as we heard at the beginning of the show, wants 5% business privilege tax forever. And not only that, but she's raising other taxes as well. There's a movement in play right now to raise the property taxes. She's also looking at raising fees across the board for government of Guam operations. But the funny thing is, as a result of the increase in the business privilege tax, every year since that business privilege tax has been in force, the government of Guam has run surpluses. And the governor uses those surpluses as her personal money. So what this reminds me of is we've got senators in the 36th Guam legislature that committed to rolling back the business privilege tax. Why haven't they? And it goes back to who is standing in the way of rolling back the business privilege tax. And we need to look no further than Senator Joseph Augustine, because it is through his efforts that he keeps the Lou-crats. I don't even call them Democrats anymore. I call them Lou-crats. The Lou-crats in the legislature are going to hold on to that 5% increase forever, as we heard at the beginning of this presentation. What does that tell you? We are living the Animal Farm life. Animal Farm was a book written by George Orwell back in the 30s, talking about the abuse of power and political cronyism. And rule number 7 is the mantra. It is the operating guideline for this administration and the 36th Guam legislature, and it reads, all animals are created equal, but some animals are more equal than others. And we saw this way back in the beginning days of the administration, when one of their first acts on taking power was to give pay raises to exempt employees in the administration, deputy directors and directors, and key political insiders. We saw well-connected insiders like Tom Adda give himself a massive pay raise on the first day he took over at Guam Airport Authority. We saw Roy Respicio step in at the highest step. He didn't start at step 1, which was around $86,000. No, he started out where Joanne Brown ended after 7 years as the director at 169. So where's he going? By the time he is finished with his term, he's probably going to be at $250,000. For what? I think that we as taxpayers are being ripped off left and right. So what have politicians done to make us healthier? We need to go back to this. Right now, the next biggest pork barrel is underway, Guam Memorial Hospital. Guam Memorial Hospital has always been a political pork barrel. Our politicians have been using it for decades to reward politically well-connected insiders. And can we get another pan? I just want to take a little break here. As you can see, the fear still reigns supreme, because here we are almost midway through our presentation and people still have not come to the live presentation, which is fortunate that the Guam Election Commission agreed to allow me to live stream this as well, like they do on all boards and hearings and commissions and the legislature and the courts. So back into our story. Okay, now we have the new pork barrel. It starts with the governor refusing refusing to return land, that the Navy was committed to returning to the people of Guam, and the governor refuses to return it to the landowners. So much for making the people of Guam a priority. Now, as we saw, she has set aside $300 million of that $500 million in America Rescue Plan funds to use as bait to ensure that all of her fundraisers are wildly successful. Because what contractor, and I don't blame these contractors, they're just trying to survive, but what contractor can afford not to donate generously and see to it all their friends and family and contacts donate generously? I wonder if that's intentional. We have the, I guess that's the governor. Either the governor or the lieutenant governor have just arrived at Adelaide. Maybe they'll join us. I hope so. I've got questions. But getting back to the hospital and the fact that the governor's using it as a political pork barrel, she's sitting on top of $300 million. You would think she would keep at least one of her campaign promises. And that was that she would make renovation and modernization of the labor and delivery room at Guam Memorial Hospital priority one. And she was going to find the money to do it, claiming that she has the experience and background and knowledge that she would be able to find the money to be able to do that. Oh, this looks like it's going to be interesting. Morning.
Just checking on you guys.
We're doing fine.
Okay, what is this? Is this
This is,
hanging
hold on.
out just
Oops. This is, go to camera 2. Isaac, who's got the camera? This is Isaac. Okay, what we're doing here is a public education meeting on the voter initiative process,
okay?
introducing 6 initiatives that we are going to be, and this is the first of 10 meetings as required by Guam law.
Okay, so is this like your, do you have to like announce this publicly? Like,
We had a
you
public
guys send out
announcement.
Okay.
And we sent a notification to John Calvo as required.
Okay.
Now, he hasn't responded,
Okay.
so I assume that since he didn't respond, he didn't have any issues with it.
Okay, no worries. I'm just checking on you guys, making sure you're okay.
And
How
you
many
are?
people? I'm Officer Lozama.
You're Officer Lozama?
Are you guys expecting a lot of people, just a couple, or just whoever shows up really?
Well, we are expecting whoever shows up, but as you can see,
Got it.
no one has shown up because
All
of...
right. You guys have a good day.
Okay. Okay. On with the show. This is it. Those of you old enough will recognize that. Okay, here we are. Let's go back to my split screen. And we are, oh yes. We're back at pork barrel politics and the governor's commitment. Okay, hold on. Oh, okay, channel B. I guess I could do channel B for a while. All right. Now, during the campaign debate at the Guam Medical Association, the governor was very, very clear that day one, she was going to fix the labor and delivery room. Here we are 3 years into her administration, coming to the end of her administration, and she has not done anything, not a single thing. And during the meantime, somewhere between 600 and 7,500 children have been born in this hospital. So when it comes to keeping campaign promises, remember this one. Because if the governor is successful at going ahead and building her medical center of the Pacific, as she is trying to do, another 20 to 25,000 children will be born in the old, dilapidated, outdated, and barely functioning labor and delivery room operations at Guam Memorial Hospital. This reminds me too much of the Simon Sanchez pork barrel. Because if you recall, during the Calvo administration, there was an effort by the Calvo administration to give $100 million contract to a relative to build Simon Sanchez. Even though the relative wasn't qualified, and even though the company was a mixed martial arts promotion firm. Now, what the hell does a mixed martial arts promotion firm that promotes cage events in the Philippines do to merit a $100 million contract funded by the taxpayers of Guam? You see, I'm glad that not just me, but enough people stood up that contract went nowhere. And then we found out later that it wasn't $100 million. There were plans to milk that cow for up to $160 million paid for by you and me, coming out of our pockets, not going to fixing schools, not going to making the people safer, not going to hiring more police officers, going into pork barrel politician pockets. And I wish I could say this administration was better. I had high hopes, but they were pretty well dashed. And it goes back to their location. Now remember, politicians are hoping that you aren't watching this. They're really hoping you aren't. Because then they would have to justify to you why she wants to spend $1 billion building a medical center in the worst possible place from a population point of view, from a logistics point of view, and from a taxpayer burden point of view. Eagles Field on the back road. Now, she talks about it being $1 billion project, but that's not quite true, because the legislation that was passed caps out at 1.7 billion, not 1 billion. And the part that really makes this bad is right here. Bonds issued not subject to voter approval. This is how our politicians are sticking it to us every opportunity they get, because they went ahead and passed a law in the 24th legislature, Public Law 24222, that says no bond over $25 million can be done without voter approval. Fees can't be raised without voter approval in the next election. And yet, routinely, our politicians are issuing bonds and raising fees by putting that little "not subject to voter approval" in the law. Now, Speaker B.J. Cruz raised that issue one time, saying that we should eliminate this law because it's a farce. But no politician wants to be seen eliminating a law that protects the public financially. So they just sneak it in the back door, hoping that we won't notice. Well, when you look at that $1.7 billion that's going to be coming out of taxpayer pocketbooks, I wish I could say that was the end of it. But like all good stories, it's not. So you have 1.7 billion. And then there's this little thing called road improvements. Right now, Route 15 is not a safe road on a good day. It's certainly not the kind of road that you want to send ambulances rushing down, trying to get to the facility to save someone's life, maybe your child's life, or your spouse's life, or maybe even your life. Because anyone who drives Route 15 knows that it's just a rolling traffic jam at peak hours. And it's a very dangerous road during the rainy season, which this year is every month. And then on top of that, we have this little thing called utility upgrades. It's going to take about $100 million worth of water, sewer, and power upgrades to support the facility that the governor has in mind. And then we have this little thing. The Department of Defense is now looking at that site to put a missile system in. Missiles to protect the people of Guam from South Korea and China, who brag in the media all the time about their Guam killers. So let's see, what would serve the people of Guam better? A pork barrel hospital that will be built where it's guaranteed to fail? Or a missile defense system being built at a time when tensions are rising in our region and we're seeing multiple launches coming our direction on a monthly basis. I, for one, vote for the missile defense system. There are better places to build a hospital than out there on Route 15, and the governor knows it. She just won't admit it because there's no chance of pork barrel payoffs to politically well-connected insiders if she does the right thing, which would be to rebuild Guam Memorial Hospital on the site of the previous Guam Memorial Hospital or on the site of the existing Guam Memorial Hospital. Both are doable, but they're not very profitable for politicians. And that isn't all. Right now, the governor hopes that you've turned me off by now and you're not listening to this one right here. But now we have a situation where Guam Regional Medical Center, we're going to talk more about them later, wants to issue a $600 million revenue bond to buy itself from itself, and that to be guaranteed by the taxpayer of Guam. Now, a lot of people, mostly in the administration, tell me, oh no, it's not going to be the taxpayers, it's going to be a revenue bond, it's going to come from Guam Regional Medical Center. So I went to GITA and asked them for proof that any revenue bond issued will be, the taxpayers will not be liable for it, and they can't do it. They issued me a letter saying, oh, we can't do that, we don't have any information, there's no information that exists at this point in time. So here we go. And once again, I appreciate you guys for putting up with my okay, there's my E. There we go. So I appreciate you guys for putting up with it. I appreciate you guys for watching this video and learning what our politicians are doing behind closed doors in our name, but not necessarily for our benefit. If they were really trying to benefit the people of Guam, they would have spent the 110 to 150 million the Army Corps first said it would take to renovate the existing Guam Memorial Hospital and bring it up to standards. And then somehow that report disappeared. And now we got a new report that says, oh, we need to spend 750 million to build a new hospital someplace else. I'm in favor of the former, because if we renovate the existing Guam Memorial Hospital, we can avoid the liabilities and the extended cost of rebuilding Route 15 and extending the utilities. So that is just another pork barrel. And we have to be careful about falling into the trap of getting sucked into more pork barrels. But no, it's not all doom and gloom, Let's take a look at the accomplishments of the 36th Guam legislature, the highlights. Well, they created a humanitarian award to recognize efforts of people in a time of emergency. They renamed all the 7 southern villages, and they affirmed the independence of the Ethics Commission. Now, the Ethics Commission hasn't done anything, but at least we know now by legislative fiat, it is independent. So I leave you with the words of George Sotomayor before we talk about the initiatives, who said, those who do not remember the past are doomed to repeat it. And that is what we see happening right now in election after election. And politicians are counting on that. Politicians are counting on that fact that they hope that you, as a voter, are not going to be paying any attention to what happened in the past, what promises were made on the campaign trail. So let's look at our first initiative. Initiative 1, no primary election. Now, the primary election is the biggest tool that political parties use to game the system and to control who gets to run to register. If we didn't have a primary election, most of the candidates I've talked to would have preferred to run as independents. But we can't because the game is stacked against independents, and that is by intent. And I say that is by intent because the way the law is written, if I